There are several packages down here.
Oh, I'm going to mute you there, Bill, just for a sec. We are so psyched today for Halitics. Welcome, by the way, to the program Halitics, and very pleased to have friend of the show, super smart, interesting writer, Bill Neal, joining us. And you've got his Substack. You've got his Substack URL there. It's also in the show description. Welcome, Bill. How you doing today?
I'm doing fine, Hal. I hope you're well.
I'm doing great. I hear your PA system. I guess we're going to learn what you're going to have for lunch today. I said, get me a sub, but you said I might not want that sub. Is that right? Unfortunately,
I don't go usually for those offers.
I understand. Well, my mother-in-law lives in a home right now, and I never eat their food. I don't. I hope I won't be in a situation where I'll have to eat the institutional food, because you just can't make good institutional food. I don't know what's that about. Why can't we? What's the economic reason for that, Bill?
You remember school lunches, Hal? Okay. Well, similar. They're generally mass produced to help a cause by, let me just say it politely, not the world's central kitchen imagination.
Yeah, and restaurants are able, a high-end restaurant can make a lot of meals, or top caterers can make good meals, but they spend a lot of money and they are put a lot of focus on it. You know, the example that you just provide, the school lunch situation, college lunch is also, school lunch, but whatever, institutional camp food, that's why I'm really not a socialist, because I've been, when government does some things, it doesn't do them so well. And if you know where you want to eat, you're going to make a decision about food that day. It's not like you have to plan for 25 years down the line whether you might or might not get cancer and set money aside for it for healthcare. But I think people can make good decisions about what they're going to eat over the next week or so without having the government have to get involved in it to the extent that it does in other areas.
I've had this long discussion with family members who are vegan or vegetarian, Hal, and I am not. I try to eat a very balanced diet. I'm aware of all the criticisms of red meat, and I don't eat much of it. But I remind them, as I did in my long essay, the mathematical economist, of the emotional component, the psychological component of food, which is what you liked as a child, good or bad, it stays with you, the memory, and it is not easy to break those habits, especially if the habit breakers aren't good cooks. And I remember my introduction to Chinese and Indian food at good restaurants, and I just dove in, and I still relish their food. I don't get it very often, but there it is, the emotional component, the psychological component of everything we're going to talk about. And
all right, you're watching Halitics, and if you want to join Bill and me, 240-242-5646. Bill, I'm just going off on weird directions, but in terms of, the situation where we have a hungry nation, we have many Americans who don't have enough to eat, tragically. Where do you stand on it? This is a debate I got into with a lot of my more liberal or progressive cohorts. They probably, I have strange views, but I argued, I liked your view. What do you think about having junk food like Doritos and other snack items, Coca-Cola, as payable by SNAP? Should SNAP assistance be used, or should one be able to use your SNAP, your Supplemental Nutrition Program money to pay for that stuff?
Well, that's the question you want to ask J.D. Vance. Don't put Bill Neal on the spot on that. Ask Vance, and you'll have a nice casual conversation.
Well, what does he say? What's his answer?
Well, I suspect he'd go through the roof, just like he has on the immigrant issue in Ohio. Hal, here's my answer. I am in favor of a very broad-minded and multifaceted civilian conservation corps, whatever you want to call it. And I'd love to see them so inclined to do the work that our retiring congressman, David Trone, has gotten into, the need for psychological counseling in acute crisis cases. But to use alternative food and agriculture training and techniques and work to raise some good foods that are not currently available at schools and small towns, and almost prepare a backup agriculture to no harm. And that doesn't mean, because it hasn't so far, despite all the advocates and publicity, organic food has not overturned the core of American agriculture. But I think it could be very therapeutic and useful in a practical sense. And it ought to be no more controversial than public financial aid to alternative schools, including religious schools, right? I mean, what's the diff?
Well, I think we should be promoting healthy foods. I think government should, to the extent we have to provide people with SNAP, that should provide food, not stuff that's sort of a food-like substance that you stick in your mouth. But I like Civilian Conservation Corps because then people are productive. They're working, they're getting paid to do work, and they get money, and then they can buy, if they want to buy junk food, go ahead, buy it. That's up to them. But if it's the taxpayer money being used to help families, I want kids eating healthy foods, just as you say, just as you set out, Bill. Bill, this is from your Substack, the second Bill of Rights greened. By the way, I never thought that, but it's the Bill of Rights, so I assume that's you, Bill Neal. Ukraine's audacity, Democrats' elation over this is a very long piece. There's a little bit of stream of conscience to it. It rewards a close reading. I spent a lot of time going through this. Didn't get through all of it, I'll be honest with you, but there's a lot of very, very valuable stuff in here that's very well written. So I do commend it to your attention. And it's the links are in the show description. So, Bill, we'll get to a few of the points here. I just want to show one other image for it, and then we'll talk maybe about the specifics in there after we go through what's happening in the Middle East. But we do have a picture here there, which I used for my thumbnail. There's Zelensky in somewhat of a heroic pose. And before we get into Israel, you admire him, do you not, Bill? I mean, you and I agree on so much. We are 180 degrees apart on this issue. You want us to keep funding that war. Is that right?
Yes, and I want the U.S. To call some of Putin's red lines about the longer range offensive weapons, although it looks like Ukraine used their new rocket drone to hit a huge munitions storage depot with almost nuclear type large explosions recently, about 300 miles into Russia, 300 kilometers into Russia. And I don't think that NATO and Biden have made the decision to allow the long-range ATACMS to be used inside Russia. We're all waiting for that. I'm unaware that I think it's going to happen.
I mean, are you rooting for, I hate to ask it this way, and it's obnoxiously phrased, but are you rooting for a thermonuclear war?
Well, I have consulted, silly me, not wanting to have my fingerprints on vast nuclear destruction and all the scientific facts that go with what that means. I listen to people who spend a lot of time thinking about this and asking how realistic it is. And I side with the Ben Hodges, who had this weight on his shoulders commanding U.S. forces in Europe. And he thinks the chances are very, very small that Putin would ever do it. and he certainly would launch into Western Europe or the US. The real question is, would he use a tactical nuke to prevent a collapse or demonstrate his will over some point in the Ukraine? And there it still makes no sense if he uses it. And anticipating this line of questioning, how I would note that both China and India have told him, from what I can gather personally, nukes are off the table in any form for any use.
So what's our end game then? Is our end game to depose Putin? Are we going to do we want Ukraine to go all the way to Moscow and take over that country and create a vacuum? I mean, what are we trying to do here? That's
the pertinent question, and the complex thinkers I listen to, their thinking does change, so you have to stay up with them. Vlad Vexler, Russian emigre, who's British really now, but kind of has a Western philosophical mind, says that's as Ben Hodges does. We've never had U.S. or NATO, and especially Germany, wanted to face what the real objective of our intervention and support is. In Ukraine's mind, it's got to be get the Russians back to the 1991 border. It's not to invade Russia, although what happened in Kursk, we can talk about, is a tactical move to try to change the dynamics of the war. Russia doesn't seem terribly worried about it.
Right. I just want to jump in. It doesn't seem to be helping. I mean, the dynamic of the war has been an absolute disaster for Ukraine. It's been really bad for Russia, no question about it. But Ukraine, as David Ignatius puts it, is bleeding out. And the invasion has not changed that one whit. It's actually seems to be stiffening Russia's resolve and the Russian invasion. So why not push for peace? Right? Why not sue for peace right now? We haven't sued for peace in over 2 years. We've stymied peace.
There's no chance that Ukraine would go for that under current conditions. And then that's too damn bad. Then they can fight Russia on their own if they want to. If it's that important to them to fight to the last. If it's that important to Zelensky to fight to the last Ukrainian, well, all right, and knock yourself out, man, because we're not gonna help you wipe out your entire country. That raises the question of whether there are any serious consequences for democracy and the West, not just the U.S., in allowing that to happen. And the analysis I read is that there are, which depends upon your evaluation of Russian history and where Putin is in that flow. I wrote down some initials anticipating this line of debate, Hal, and they came out to be, in terms of Russia and Putin, Mr. Ga, make Russia great again. It's the Russian Putin version of MAGA. Maybe that's why they're such good buddies, Putin and Trump. And you have to grasp the abyss that Russia plunged to around 1991, after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1990 and 91, when all the former Soviet satellites and ethnic portions of the empire broke away, including Ukraine. And the catastrophe for the Russian economy, the Russian lifespan, male lifespan, was worse than our Great Depression, to put it in those terms. What perfect ingredients for someone like Trump to come and build a new nation on new premises. Actually, they're quite old. Russian supremacy, pan-Slavism, and that is what Putin has.
But that doesn't seem to be what Putin wants. I mean, you're saying Putin wants to take all of Ukraine, but there were serious talks in 22 until Boris Johnson squashed them, in which it appeared that two countries were close and they could agree on some part of the Donbass, which is now almost completely in Russian control, would be returned to Russia or would become a demilitarized zone. And we, NATO that is, would stay out of Ukraine. It seemed like a reasonable solution. It was sure a lot better than having over 1 million casualties now and having Ukraine laid waste to. But again, we can't go back. We could all look back and say this was a terrible mistake by Biden Harris. I know Kamala Harris has boasted about how she mobilized all these different countries against Russia, and the result has been an absolute disaster for Eastern Europe. But we can't go back and change that. It happened. But what we can do is say, okay, we screwed up before, but now let's end this. As Trump has said, I think eloquently, I want people not to die. I just don't understand this. It's like it's a personal thing. We have to show Putin. Well, if Putin were Hitler and he were hell-bent on taking over all of Europe, that would be one thing. And if he had the power to do it. But he doesn't have the power. He can't even beat Ukraine. He can't even beat this little country. Russia's it's falling apart. It's time for peace, Bill.
No, it is not. And the bloodbath that would follow a settlement sooner or later on the terms you're advocating and that Trump would surely impose on Ukraine. First of all, Ukraine's not going to agree to. And you fly over.
What are they not going to agree to?
Or ignore the actual facts on the ground in the areas that Russia has captured, what they've done to deport Ukrainian children, how they treated the prisoners of war, and so forth throughout Ukraine.
All right. So granting that's true, and I think it's exaggerated, isn't that an argument though, Bill? Just let me, granting that's true, and again, I think it's exaggerated by the neocons who are promoting this war. But even if it were true, isn't that an argument again for peace where we're in a position to negotiate and say, hey, you got to stop it. That's part of the conditions is you don't get to deport people and separate families.
I'm not a neocon, and I would go back.
Oh, I'm not saying you are. But I'm saying those who are promoting the war, the Victoria Newlands of the world.
Yeah, there's a lot of, there's yes. And what I have argued consistently is by her intervening in the Ukrainian Civil War, which was a civil war between Western Europe-leaning Ukrainians and Russian-leading Ukrainians, right down to their armed gangs, has given us the indication that I read, and Professor Snyder has summarized, is that the Ukrainians decided, the majority wanted to go west. And therefore, because she was meddling and Russia wanted to fight it out on the battlefield to say, no, we have a moral obligation to do more than we're doing now, which is a stalemate. I don't think, and some have said it's an attempt to bring Russia down and get rid of Putin. I think the West is terribly afraid of what would follow in his course. But I think the first step is just getting Russia back to the 1991 boundaries. If that leads to the overthrow of Putin, it's not going to be Ukrainian troops in Moscow that do it. It will be the oligarchs or any other movement inside Russia that we already saw an attempt at back last year, right, in the summer. Well,
even if the goal is to push Russia out of Ukraine, that's not it. We're going in the wrong direction, right? I mean, Ukraine's offensive, even if it's true that Ukraine has and they have overrun some Russian territory. Russia has also at the same time gained more territory on the ground in Ukraine. And they've been at 18 to 20% of Ukraine has been in Russian hands since the war began. So there's been no progress whatsoever.
Yes,
in terms of pushing Russia out.
The reason isn't just the manpower factor, which is certainly a factor in both countries, but more so for Ukraine than Russia. It's the weapons that they tried to hit those intensely fortified lines with no air support. How I can't stress enough that no serious military thinker would ever engage our troops or NATO troops in this type of conflict, just as it is today, without air superiority, which is exactly what we've denied and continue to deny. 6 or 7 F-16s are going to make no difference whatsoever. And the denial of Ukraine's ability to hit the storage places and the airfields that Russia is pounding their cities from is there as well. Other than that, Ukraine is innovative, risk-taking, and has done an incredible job of advancing, if you think that's a good thing, military technology.
I mean, I think what you're saying is ignoring the extraordinary human cost, and frankly, what's less important but still really important, the financial cost of this war, the thousands and thousands killed, the over 1 million injured, the destruction of eastern Ukraine. I mean, it's just a bombed out shell. You know, yes, I don't see, to me, that is such an extraordinary cost. And I get it. If you're fighting for, let me just finish. If you're fighting for your freedom, if you're fighting because your enemy is a Nazi and they're determined to turn you into a slave labor camp, that's one thing. But that's not the situation at all. Russia has made it very, very clear they want security in the East. They want the Russians, some of the Russian-speaking Donbass region, which apparently is prepared to go to Russia to become Russian or be DMZ'd.
I think you're naive about Putin's character, intentions, and behavior up and down the line, and you just proved it to me. He just as if I think you're naive in your assessment of Hitler. In what year assessment of Hitler? 33, 35, 38.
How was I naive? I said he was determined to turn countries into slave labor. How was that naive?
No idea how to evaluate Hitler realistically. Of course, they might have read Mein Kampf, what he was going to do in that stretch. They had the same view that you have of Putin, of Hitler, from 35 to 39, with very few exceptions, Churchill being a late prime example. I just think you're naive about...
Bill, we've seen that Russia can't even defeat Ukraine. After 2 years, Russia's weaker than ever. It can't even defeat Ukraine. Germany had proven in the past 50 to 100 years, before World War II began, that it was the biggest power in all of Europe. It fought for 4 years a two-front war against Russia and the West, and would have probably been able to continue if it weren't for internal division. It almost defeated both countries single-handedly. So it's not the same at all. Russia's far weaker than Germany was. It has far less power, and it can't even beat Ukraine. And if you want to look at imperialism, we're the imperialist monster. We're the gorilla, not Russia.
I disagree with that, Hal, in terms of who is a threat to Western Europe, and we can argue it out on the nature of neoliberalism and the economies of Western Europe, where there are unhappy working class people and rural people, just like in the U.S. That's another discussion, because the people of Eastern Europe, after the collapse of the Soviet Empire, wanted to get under NATO's umbrella as fast as possible, and not all for cynical reasons that they were going to, it was a rush to Western weapon suppliers. That's certainly a factor. I don't think it's a determining factor. It's their aftertaste of totalitarianism, Russian style. And tell me, you say nothing about freedom to dissent in Russia, where if you're killed, imprisoned, assassinated, even if you go abroad in the West. Come on, Hal.
I'm not. First of all, I'm not. This is no defense of Putin. I'm not. I never said Putin is some wonderful, soft, cuddly person. Not in the least. That's not my point. My point is that this endless war.
Still higher ambitions, and will stop at Ukraine. I don't agree with that.
He might if he had the Wehrmacht at his disposal and he was up against a cavalry like the Germans were when they invaded Poland. Then maybe he would keep going. But he's not in that situation.
He to show how talking about the nuclear worries. Well, what card has Putin waved on the face of the Rush? Not T-34 tanks from World War II. Or hundreds of divisions, which he doesn't have. It's his nuclear threat and how the West assess how serious he is. And he's continuing to play that as long as you give it so much credibility. Why wouldn't he do exactly?
I don't know whether there'll be a war or not.
Wouldn't he do exactly what you say?
Bill,
if you back down with a nuclear saber waved over your head.
All right. Well, we're never gonna agree on this, but I will say that Bill's got a great piece out there.
It was only a quarter of my essay, and I congratulate you for zeroing in on the psychological portrayal of Zelensky, which I chose with care in the opening picture.
Well, we're going to get to some of the other aspects of your essay. We're not limited whatsoever to Ukraine. And I sort of am a little bit sorry we bogged down on it because we're going to agree a lot more, I think, on the neoliberal issue. I just wanted to get this point, and then we're going to get, and I did things differently today, Bill. You're such a special guest for me that I delayed discussion of Israel-Gaza, which has been my focus pretty much every single program since October 7th. But I just wanted to put this headline up from Ignatius, and you probably read the piece. Now, I use this as an argument for why we need peace, because Ukraine is bleeding out. But you and Ignatius seem to use this as an argument for escalating, right? For taking the war to the next level.
I am for allowing Ukraine to exercise its rights under the international agreements of warfare conduct, which is if the other side is pounding your cities, you have a right to at least strike the sources, military sources that are launching the rockets, the glide bombs, and the ballistic missiles, as well as looking at who is supplying them. Those wonderful democracies in North Korea, Iran, and especially in the minor parts, China. Yes.
Well, that's true. But on the other hand, since we're supplying...
worry about Putin's motives with such marvelous democratic allies that are supplying him with arms. Who would do that?
I'm not really I don't worry so much about motives. Other people worry about motives. I really worry about lives lost. And I absolutely do worry about whether Ukraine remains, quote, free, unquote. It's sort of semi-free. But would I rather live in Ukraine? Would I rather live in Kiev or Moscow? Well, right now, Kiev isn't really a very safe place to be. But yes, if there wasn't a war, I'd much prefer to live in Kiev. But I'm relatively affluent. I wouldn't be homeless. I'm sure there's plenty of homeless people in both capitals. And if you don't have any money and you're impoverished, it sucks to be wherever you are. So I'm not going to say anything positive here. This isn't about saying positive things about Putin. It's trying to come up with the best solution in a bad situation. And I guess we just don't agree that the best solution is for this war to continue, or even if the continuation means missiles being launched against Moscow. That just means more dead people.
The missiles would be launched against military sites outside of Moscow primarily, and they would be the Western restrictions if we lift the ATACMS and the cruise missile restrictions from Germany and Britain. It wouldn't be on apartment buildings in Moscow.
Well, you hope not, but we've seen the civilian count is very high in both countries, tragically. Let's get to, not as high in Russia because the war's been fought mostly in Ukraine. But
civilian deaths in Russia proper, not the East now, or anything approaching
Right.
Ukrainian casualties.
Well, that's true because the war's been fought in Ukraine.
Yeah.
So that's why. But it's been awful. It's been awful. It's a horrible, horrible stalemate. It's World War I all over again.
No, you keep working on President Zelensky, Hal. Don't work on me. I have my mind made up.
Well, I think we just need to stop supplying it. We need to stop.
What the tactics and the strategy should be. So that's where I am. And if Ukrainians don't want to pay that price, they can stop the war and wave the white flag.
We should be promoting peace. We should be helping broker a deal that both sides can live with rather than everyone dying under.
I am not a peacemaker at all costs under all circumstances.
Well, neither am I. I don't think we should get peace. Should not mean that the Russian flag flies over Kiev. That wouldn't be a peace that I would support.
Looking at, and in most cases, I have not favored the use of force, especially since Vietnam. But let's get on to Gaza.
Well, this is really as bad as it can be, what's happening there. You just see this is 34. I saw a lot of different numbers in the thumbnail I used for today's program. They actually have a video where they say there were 42 killed by Israel in Gaza over the past 24 hours, which I believe past 24 hours means if it's Thursday here, that's Wednesday in Gaza. I believe that's how they did it. The video has the 42 dead with a caption. Then there's another caption that says 20 as this is what Anadolu Ajansi says, 34. We really just don't know. Their bodies buried under rubble. We know 15,000 children have been identified as killed. This is a war you do not think we should be helping Israel fight, correct? The war on the people of Gaza.
That's right. And my position is very unpopular that to end the war, Israel will have to, in some way, come to terms with Hamas, which they refuse to do, given Hamas's long-term statements about Israel. But I don't think we're ever going to get the hostages back, U.S. or Israeli or other nations, by continuing down this path. But it's absolutely gridlocked. And despite millions turning out in U.S. streets and campuses all through the spring, we have neither moved the U.S. government nor did the comparable protests in Israel very recently after the deaths of the hostages, who were executed by Hamas, change the Netanyahu government. So I'm a close observer, and I don't see any resolution without a challenge to Hamas's power inside Gaza and their stance. It would have to be also a stance that is acceptable to Israel. I see no evidence that is happening anywhere, and that the long-term pieces of the strategy, which were essentially an Israeli superpower agreement, the Gulf Coast states agreement with Saudi Arabia primarily, that left out the Palestinians, was the big gambit, and it fell apart thanks to Hamas's tactics, as brutal as they were. They were desperate, and they played, I think, in their minds, the only card they could. And that's where we are. There's no way. I have no solution other than what I said. It's out of my hands. It's in the hands of the Palestinian people or the people of Israel to overthrow the Netanyahu government and come to terms.
And you don't think the U.S. government bears some responsibility for continuing to provide the weapons that Israel is using to eradicate Gaza?
Of course.
And now, by the way, also expanding fronts, right? I mean, we've seen Israel has expanded its front now illegally. Well, it's been illegally occupying the West Bank, but now killing Palestinians there, sending in military troops. This really ugly, explosive tactics that they're using now, blowing up children in Lebanon who are proximate. They would say, oh, we're only going after Hezbollah, but yeah, sorry, we have to kill a few children or break a few eggs when we make an omelet.
I put a comment in the New York Times that if when you construct 3,500 or thereabouts improvised IEDs that are in devices that are in everybody's homes, you were not going to have no civilian casualties, including kids or pets.
Well, isn't that why they shouldn't have done it? Isn't that the argument for not doing it? Now, I get it. Again, if you're oppressed, I mean, I look at the people of Gaza, I look at the Palestinian people, they're persecuted, they're oppressed, they're victims. They don't really have a lot of options. They don't have freedom of movement. But Israel could do a lot. Israel could just stop oppressing the Palestinians. It could take its jackboot off the throat of Palestine. It could give them complete political rights. And then all this would be over.
I think you, as well as I know, Hal, that the viewpoint in Israel is that given their opponents in Hamas and Hezbollah, their ideological stance towards the state of Israel, that they are always and almost without caveat fair game for any kind.
That's because they're killing Palestinians. They're fair game because they're killing Palestinians. They're occupying their land. They've relegated them to second-class citizen, and now they're stepping up a genocide. It's sort of like you're blaming, it would be like the response if the Nazis said, well, we have to kill all those people in the Warsaw Ghetto because they shot at us. Well, no, wait a second. The reason they shot at you is because you're wiping them off the face of the earth.
You're misrepresenting my view.
Well, no, I'm just explaining what's happening.
Describing what I perceive to be the Israeli view. I didn't indicate what I thought of it.
Okay, well, that's fair. And then my answer to that is
there will be no peace if they maintain that stance until they wipe out all their opponents, which is very unlikely, or their opponents change their viewpoints. Now, that's very different than condoning or admiring. I'd be in the streets protesting the Netanyahu government because I see no peace until the opponents are wiped out. And has that ever been a way that conflicts have been settled?
Well, this is so.
No.
So, but we're supporting what Israel's doing. We're supporting the Netanyahu government. I agree. We can't. I guess we could assassinate Netanyahu the way we assassinated Gaddafi, but otherwise.
I agree how there is no among the two major contending parties for the U.S. election. And now we can get into Jill Stein.
Well, before we get to Stein or the neoliberal debate, I just want to play this clip. This is just from a couple of days ago. There's so many of these like this. Kamala Harris is always repeating the same talking point over and over. And here she does it in Philadelphia at the National Association of Black Journalists. And I'm sure you've heard this or something very similar, Bill, but I want your take on this comment by Harris.
Up really quickly, is there a specific policy change that you as president of the United States would say you would do that would help this along? Because you've gotten a lot of credit for emphasizing the humanity of Palestinians, but what I often hear from folks is that there's no policy change that either you or the President Biden have gone and said they would do. Is there a specific policy change as president that you would do in our helping of Israel?
We need to get this deal done. And we need to get it done immediately. And that is my position, and that is my policy. We need to get this deal done.
But in the way that we send weapons, in the way that we interact as their ally, are there specific policy changes? Well,
Eugene, for example, one of the things that we have done that I am entirely supportive of is the pause that we've put on the 2,000-pound bombs. And so there is some leverage that we have had and used. But ultimately, the thing that is going to unlock everything else in that region is getting this deal done. And
all right. So what do you think of that? I mean, I'll ask some point questions, but
what deal is she talking about?
well, a ceasefire, which she says will unlock everything. But the question was, what would you do differently? What policy? And she says, well, we paused. It's true, we're not shipping them those huge bombs, but Israel hasn't missed a beat. They're just dropping the 500-pound. She didn't mention we keep the 500-pound bombs going on and on and on, and that they're able to kill just as many civilians and everyone else they want with those bombs as well. And I'm not even sure we aren't sending them 2,000-pound bombs. We may well be.
Well, how I didn't, among the my very long essay in 4 parts, spend much time, except in a portion of my comments that I led with on Ukraine. I got back to our policy on Israel, but there's been no movement between either the parties, and the grand deal that Biden was after that left the Palestinians out of the picture entirely has not happened, and we're in a stalemate. And she sounds very unsure of herself and not very impressive, as she usually is when we get into the nuts and bolts of policy.
Don't you think that answer? I mean, for me, that answer disqualifies her as somebody for whom I could vote. I mean, this is a genocide that we're witnessing. This is we have a moral imperative, as we did in 1940, 39, 40, 41, once the machinery of death really ramped up in 42 to try to stop the Nazi killing machine. And we didn't do as good a job as we could have. There were steps we could have taken that we didn't take, but at least we didn't grease the skids. At least we didn't provide them with the trains that they used to transport Jews to Auschwitz, or the machine guns that they used to shoot them into pits at Babi Yar. But we are now providing the machinery of death to Israel, and you've just heard Kamala Harris say she's not going to do anything different. She says we need a ceasefire, but we only would get a ceasefire if we stopped giving Israel the weapons that they're using to kill Palestinians with. So to me, that I can't vote for her based on that answer, and I'm just wondering what your reaction is to that.
My reaction is that the idea that either Trump or Ms. Harris and her running mate, the Democratic Party, as I know it so well from 50 years, and the party I know in Maryland with the ambassador from Israel, Ben Cardin, having been in the driver's seat of foreign policy for so long. There's no way in hell that either party makes Israel do anything that Israel under Netanyahu doesn't want to do. That's of significance. They may get a little eyebrow raise here, a little concession there, won't kill so many food providers like the World Central Kitchen 7, but no change in policy. It's not possible, given the power of AIPAC and the force that the cause of the state of Israel has in American religious thinking, which has a hold of both parties.
Well, then isn't that the reason that you just can't vote for her? Why would you? If I agree with you, the Unitary Party is all in for Israel. There is a division between the Unitary Party on Ukraine. Trump really appears genuinely to want to end that horrific war. You want it to escalate. I understand we have different views. You want us to escalate it. But for me, that is a strong argument for Trump. Now, I won't vote for Trump for a lot of other reasons, including his position on Palestine, Israel. But I guess I'm just going to ask you, what's the argument that it's okay to vote for Kamala Harris if she, as you correctly state, in my opinion, she's going to continue to provide Israel with the weaponry that it's using to eradicate Gaza?
Al, forgive me if I sound impolite to my host here, but it seems to me that framing the moral situation of this election up in the way you're doing pretty much equates Putin with Trump in terms of harmlessness, whereas I think they're both tremendous threats to the best values of the West that we don't live up to, and that my highest value in this election is stopping Trump, and Harris, who has no guarantee of doing it, has a far better chance than Jill Stein or anybody else you want to talk about.
Right, but if the goal, if an essential goal, if a goal that we must try to achieve is to stop another country from committing genocide with our support.
Some other year, Hal, it's not going to happen.
So you don't think that the genocide of Gaza is so serious that if someone supports it, they should just be ruled out as a candidate, as someone you could vote for?
That's not the only reason they're being ruled out as a candidate. It's
no. I'm saying, but Harris supports the genocide of Gaza. So my question is, given that fact, you're saying nevertheless,
she wouldn't call it genocide, and let's discuss.
But it is, regardless. So what if she wouldn't call? Who cares whether she'd call whatever she called? Of course she wouldn't call it that. That doesn't matter.
You have Ari Nearer, if I'm saying the name right, who wrote The Question of Genocide, and he said it was, given his illustrious history as the great American and Jewish champion of human rights for over 40 years, have him on your show and grill him over that. Ask him what he's going to do, or why. I did see him on Fareed Zakaria's, because I double checked, because I knew I'd raise his stance tonight, right now, that he was on Fareed's show, but I didn't turn up any other appearances. Here's the leading scholar of human rights with a 40-year track record. By the way, 87 years old, speaking slow, patiently, deliberately, without a falter, unlike some current sitting presidents that we know. So if the world's not paying attention to him now, the U.S. at all, I can't bring the credentials to make Bill Neal's declaration, and I'm about 80% of the way there, that it is genocide, but you can certainly supportive of Israel's have given a carte blanche. Whatever it takes to wipe out Hamas or Hezbollah, they'll do. And they don't understand the complexities of the definition or its historical resonance or precedence, especially how slow Mr. Nearer was to reach that conclusion. Okay, so don't put me on the spot.
No, I'm just curious as to why you don't think she should be ruled out as a vote.
Given the whole context, Hal, I have to vote to stop Trump by the most likely means.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go to neoliberalism, because I'm going to keep pushing you to try to renounce Harris, because I just think, and I think it's fair to say, because your point is, well, okay, Israel, it's really bad what she's doing. I get it. But you could make the argument, and many do, but Trump would be even worse on Israel. I don't know if you could be worse, but he would probably be as bad. I don't think there's a good case that he wouldn't be just as bad.
I think he can be worse given his family and his close allies and his donors.
On Israel, maybe. I'm curious. I don't know how much worse you could be, but maybe. I'm going to concede that. I'm conceding it. I think that's the argument.
But the goddamn about Ukrainian lives, believe me.
But what I would say though is that it's, for me, as well, yes, I ruled out Harris. And I said months ago, I said when she first became anointed by the Democratic elites, and you didn't like that either. You wanted some Democratic rank and file influence over who would be the nominee, and there was none. There was none whatsoever. They coalesced around her. We both agreed that was bad.
I was very clear. I wanted an open primary, which was never going to happen.
But okay, and I was just like you, very, very upset about that. But I said on this program a number of times, if she indicates that she will change, as much as I don't like her policies on just about everything, as much as I feel like she's an opportunist, she's amoral, her policies have consistently supported the elites, the 1%, she's never shown any backbone, any moral core, despite all of that, for me, Israel is the Gaza is the existential issue. If she will support an arms embargo towards Israel, if she will condition any aid to Israel on their ending the occupation, I would vote for her, despite my disagreeing with her on virtually every other issue. I would still do it because that's that important to me. But she didn't. She hasn't. She's made it clear just the other way. She's going to continue to support the slaughter of Gazans. And I can't back that.
As important as it is, and it's very clear, I hope, to readers that I respect and lean towards Ari Nayer's assessment that the case against what Israel's doing is genocide or very close to it. But I can't make, given the whole context, especially of Trump's views on democracies, his behaviors, and his targeting me as vermin very clearly with no qualifiers, okay? His intent to run deportation camps for 11 million people, that I can't accept your overriding nomination, as horrible as the war in Gaza, upon Gaza and Hamas is, that it's the overriding existential issue. All the signals I'm getting from Trump and Vance are that what I wrote about the threat of this deportation and the camps that would have to be evolved and the violation of civil and human rights to round people up and select.
Oh, it's terrible. It's very scary. And I thought that was the worst thing Trump did. I was very clear, Bill, when he was president, that what I found the most objectionable about his presidency was the way he separated families.
I wish I could draw my moral cubicle as neatly and isolated as you have.
No, that's so unfair. That's so unfair. I made the point to you that despite I disagree with her on just about everything, it's not like I think she's really good on other stuff. No, she's bad on everything, but this is so important. And
people, and coming on this show, I would be doing the Hal Ginsberg show on Gaza and why the war in Ukraine is so terrible.
Well, let's talk about neoliberalism. Let's get to that. Let's get to Bill. I so appreciate your coming here and putting up with this from me. So thank you for that. Listeners, do Bill a solid like he does for me. Please go to williamrneal.substack.com. Please click the link in the program description. It's well worth it, and I've got some really good quotes. So this is living. Go ahead.
I have a warning for the readers. It's difficult reading, and they may not know all the people I'm talking about or the ideas I mentioned. So I want to apologize for that, but all right.
So I found this quote, Bill, to be and it's true. There's a lot there. And like I said, it's somewhat stream of consciousness, which I appreciate, but it does make for a slog, no question. But it's worth it. It's worth the slog in my humble opinion.
You didn't like James Joyce?
I read the first 150 pages of Ulysses, but after a while, I just was like, I don't,
Well, so there are times when, in order to break the framework of Larry Summers' train of thought and his public speaking, I do slip into that mode of writing. I plead guilty.
I thought this was a very powerful sentence that you wrote. It seems to me that the mainstream economics profession has greatly underestimated the pain of our current, and you write it a little bit differently, but I highlighted the pain that this, the current neoliberal ascendancy has imposed on working people, on poor people, on struggling people, on middle-class people. It has created this enemy. It has created depression. It's created a sense of emptiness and a void that people have the ground is constantly shifting under people's feet. This is all completely true. And when I read that, it really struck me. So give me I just went over it, but give me what you're thinking about and what we should be doing to alleviate that pain?
Yeah, well, the what I wrote there goes right to the heart of the issue of what's causing American unhappiness and why, with the lowest unemployment rate, both under Trump and Biden, in 50 years of history, so many people seem miserable. And I thought I made it clear in the second section of my essay that Annie Lowry, the economist who was married to Ezra Klein, New York Times columnist, put her finger on it. The day-to-day life of even middle-class earners is financially incredibly stressful because it's not all just groceries and gasoline. It's childcare, educational loans, medical premiums for those not on a full public program, car insurance,
anxiety about retirement, anxiety about an illness, an expensive illness or injury. Those are all.
Also, let's face the fact, an existential fact of life. No matter who you work for, unless you're a relative or have some type of immunity inside the corporate structure, your job is not certain at all, no matter how much you're earning. You could be here today and gone tomorrow. So there's that factor. And for the people in high tech with the great skills that are in demand, they're all learning on their own at their own cost and pays AI because they're afraid the job that looked so secure 5 years ago or 3 years ago is not. To me, that's amazing. There's the psychological dimension. It isn't just the two McDonald's workers unable to put their two children into childcare or afford even a rental apartment. There it is. So,
all right. I just want to, again, remind people, this is Halitics. Bill Neal with us. You got to check out his awesome blog at Substack. I wanted to get your thoughts on this issue of underestimating the pain. I don't think there's any doubt about it. They don't even talk about the pain. But why do you think that is? Why wouldn't professors or, think tank economists, why do you think they seem oblivious to this situation?
You've heard of Nietzsche?
Well,
yes, the philosopher Nietzsche, and the late Victorian era and the death of God, and in the 3rd century, if you're talking the 1890s, the scientific rational revolution that the Frankfurt School was so worried about in the dialectic of enlightenment that it was great at applying reason and science and rationality to specific segments like medical research or steel making or electronics or AI, to give a good example, but could not see the overall picture of who was left out at all. And today, the perfect example, and I am going to publish a new essay from the footnotes I put in, because they're long enough now to be their own essay, and I have one more to go. I'm going to talk about especially stress personalities for understanding what I was writing about, as much as Wendy Brown's ideas and Marcuse's ideas. There's no greater summary in one person in demeanor or content or training or style than Larry Summers, a mathematical economist to the core, who attacked MMT like it was Luther threatening Rome in 1517. It's as ferocious as Roman Catholics persecuting heretics to defend the technological innovation and rationality from the highest circles of the economy, partly for reasons now of national defense versus China, whom we helped climb so rapidly to the top. But that's where he is. And the idea that he's going to recognize that structure and the choices, which were undermining the whole concept of New Deal mitigation of the of the pains of capitalism, who was left out, and the relative sacrifices. The distribution of income's gotten terribly worse. Labor's much weaker. He doesn't recognize any of that. At least Martin Wolf at the Financial Times has conceded that his people have underestimated how the pain and the unhappiness.
No, it's a terrible. And I would just throw this at you also in terms of an explanation, Bill. These economists, they're paid not to recognize the pain of the working class. They're paid, whether if they're in a think tank, the grants that go to those, American Enterprise Institute, Brookings, what have you, those are all funded by huge multinational corporations that make extraordinary profits by exploiting labor, by treating workers as disposable objects, by treating consumers with as little respect as they can possibly get away with and still keep their business. So economists are actually paid by the people who are profiting from this soulless, sadistic, or maybe not sadistic, I don't know if it's deliberately cruel, but they're profiting from a soulless, amoral system. Even if you work at an institution, at a university, putatively nonprofit, those universities' endowments are enormous because of the amount of money that the billionaires who attended them confer on them, like the Bill Ackmans at Harvard and the Trumps at Wharton School of Economics, etc. So the Economist has an awful lot to lose if they start centering working people.
Yes, but I would agree with that. They might lose to economists with a very different perspective, or have to admit those arguments into their very tightly drawn circles. But before that happens, how they have to understand: can the average upper middle class earner in Montgomery County understand the people in Cumberland, Maryland, their own state, who were laid off in the tens of thousands when manufacturing industries left in the 70s and 80s, to be replaced by no equivalent for blue collar workers? And that's leaving aside all the racial issues as well. And I wrote in my subsequent summaries to my essay about Susan Wojcicki, who just died, who was the CEO of YouTube, and Alex Karp, who's the head of Palantir, I waited for his name to come up with the exploding pagers, and now and I'm hearing today that it's exploding solar equipment at homes, but I'm not sure that that's the case. But I picked those two out as perfect examples of neoliberal achievers who, Susan came in 2014, gave the commencement address to Johns Hopkins, and I listened very carefully to any indication of the people left behind, or that your risk-taking as an entrepreneur wouldn't be rewarded, is that other people.
Well, that's the mantra, right? Is the opportunities. We want to reward risk takers. We want to make sure everyone has that shot at the brass ring.
I'd be a better risk taker, Hal, if I had $300,000.
Of course. Let me play this clip. Let me play this clip from the debate and get your reaction to it, because I want to make the case again. My decision not to vote for Kamala Harris is based, yes, 100% on her pro-genocide stance, but there are other reasons too if I needed them. So here we go.
Richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession.
All right, so her experts, the people her goes to, are the Wharton School of Economics, Wharton School of Economics, Goldman Sachs economists, and Nobel laureates. Aren't these the exact people that you just said don't give a crap about working people and the pain that this economy causes them?
Well, I think they tend to be much closer in thinking. I don't want to overgeneralize them, to Larry Summers, with Joe Stiglitz being a Nobel economist laureate, who dissents. He gave the first plug on the back of Yanis Varoufakis' book on techno-feudalism, which I'm slowly working my way through. Actually, it's a pretty fast read. But yeah, look, she's status quo as far as I'm concerned. What a play from an old playbook. How can you go wrong in American society? I don't care what decade you pick, by saying you're going to help small businesses. And I wrote a long essay about it, and I chose a paragraph in my current essay about that, my feelings towards it. And I said, I have left myself open to small business ads on YouTube. I feel like I'm being picked apart by blackbirds. I'm a scarecrow. I'm leaving myself open to their advertising. So I'm connected to the world that they're inventing, for better or worse. So I don't want to shut myself off from it. But the number of small businesses over a 30, 40-year period doesn't change much. They churn a lot. They're not the job creators. It's the ones that survive out of the gauntlet, and they fail at a very high rate, that in their 5th or 10th year do most of the job creation.
But yeah, and Bill, but just let me throw in here, her policy, the policies that these Nobel laureate economists promote, they aren't good for small businesses anyway. Those are the policies they promote are good for these enormous multinational corporations that have the resources that can move manufacturing operations overseas, that can sink billions and billions of dollars into a project that may not bear fruit for a decade, but when it does, man, are you can't believe the size of the mangoes that you're going to get out of it. So those policies aren't even good for small businesses.
One of the glaring contradictions, which would be easy to pick apart, is you can't praise Walmart and then also say you're for small businesses, small retailers who, nationwide have been decimated. And I admit myself, because of my own budgetary situation and in food inflation, to shopping at Walmart, not because
of course. I mean, you have no choice. This is the economy that those Nobel laureates and Wharton professors and Goldman Sachs economists have built for us. This is who her go-to is. Here's what FDR said, that if you want freedom, you have to guarantee people economic security. And you could hear in Kamala's, she doesn't even mention security. That's not even a concern. That's not on her horizon. She talks about opportunity, not security, not making, hey, if you're not the sharpest blade in the drawer, maybe you like to look at the moon and the stars a little too much. Well, sucks to be you, but you're going to be hungry one day. That's her attitude. So if that's the person, how can you say Trump's the danger? He is a danger. Project 2025 is a scary thing. Rounding up immigrants is an awful, awful thing. But the policies that Harris, Biden, Obama, the Clintons have all pushed have brought us exactly to this place.
Well, how you framed your vote against Harris as existential choice. You can't vote for somebody supporting genocide. And I fully appreciate that, which is why I cited the leading human rights historian and activist in the U.S. is agreeing with you. However, I'm making a different existential choice based on what I've known and written about Trump since 2015. He's the immediate existential threat to the best part of the American way of life, not across the board. And, Harris, if she was a dissenting economist and followed all the same chances and races that she has leading to her career, she wouldn't be there. She was a prosecutor and an attorney. And that's the pathway to the Democratic Party. So could you detect any enthusiasm from me for the Democratic
No, I'm not saying, listen, be very clear here. I am not calling for anyone to vote for Trump. I am not voting for Trump. I don't think it's fair when I say that Harris's policies provide, are going to accelerate us down that road, the ecocide genocide road. I'm not saying Trump's won't. I'm saying because her policies are that bad, we shouldn't vote for her. Not that we should then therefore vote for Trump. But you're saying Trump's policies are so bad that even though Harris's may also be bad, yes, Hal, you made some good points, I have to admit. Yeah, she's bad on, we disagree on Russia, but yes, she's bad on Israel, Gaza, and yes, her economic policies aren't mine, but they're bad. But nevertheless, we still have to vote for her because Trump. But I'm not saying Harris is awful, therefore you have to vote for Trump. I'm saying Harris is awful and Trump is awful, and therefore we have to vote for somebody else.
I hear you, and I'm not making that choice.
Fair enough. All I can do is present the case like any lawyer would, and obviously you're a tough jury, and I'm tough for you. Let's go out though before I let you go. I will play a video from Harris. Strike that.
In my jury duties here, the fairest, most noble conglomerate picked from the American public, the type of jury that all of us would want to have. If we were facing charges like Trump is facing, if we could ever get to the jury vote.
I would want you to be on my jury. If I was charged with a crime, unless I was guilty, I would want you on my jury. I'll give you a chance to follow up on this, but I want to play this video here and get your reaction, and then tell me whether she hasn't addressed the concerns that both of us are talking about here.
I thought for a second that was Wendy Brown.
People are tired of being thrown.
So Wendy Brown, I'm sure, supports Jill Stein.
I don't know.
It wouldn't surprise me based on what you wrote. And let me give another plug. First of all, you got to go do Bill a solid because he's coming on this program and putting up with me, which I really appreciate. 240-242-5646. I'll still take your call if you can call in the next 5 minutes. I know some people call at the very end, so it'd be great to talk to you.
For J.D. Vance.
But in terms of the problems that neoliberalism are creating, in terms of endless war, support for genocide, ecocide, let's hear Jill Stein.
People are tired of being thrown under the bus by wealthy elites and their bought politicians. Tired of living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to pay the rent, locked in student debt and medical debt, child poverty doubling, rising diseases of despair, growing hopelessness. The political system is broken. The two Wall Street parties are bought and paid for. Over 60% of us now say the bipartisan establishment's failed us, and we need a party that serves the people. I'm Jill Stein, and I'm running for president to offer that choice for the people outside of the failed two-party system. We'll put solutions to the crises we face, crushing inequality, endless war, and climate collapse. And we'll put these front and center in this election and on the ballot across the country. The ruling parties that got us into this mess aren't getting us out. Both parties are squandering trillions on the endless war machine, fueling conflict around the world, while tens of millions here at home lack food, housing, healthcare. Democrats have betrayed their promises for working people, youth, and the climate again and again, while Republicans don't even make such promises in the first place. And both parties are a danger to our democracy, expanding censorship, criminalizing protest, throwing competitors off the ballot, suppressing debates,
American people who have been systematically locked out of these debates,
rigging their primaries, So forget the pundits and the attack dogs who tell you to ignore your misery and just keep voting for those who caused it in the first place. Change won't come from the ruling elites. It comes from we, the people. And when we stand together, we can create living wage jobs for all Americans. We can guarantee an economic bill of rights with the right to a job, to health care, to housing, to food, education, and more. We can abolish student debt, medical debt. We can create a Green New Deal with millions of jobs to fight climate collapse and protect Mother Earth. And we can ensure our constitutional rights and freedoms and justice for all. We can end the endless wars and rampant militarism and use diplomacy and international law instead to end violence, occupation, and apartheid. We do have the power, and we can use it in this election to start building an America and a world that works for all of us. Go to JillStein2024.
All right, I'll stop. I won't have that ad there for her, but this to me, it's just so clear that this is the right option. I'm so at a. This is my existential crisis, Bill. Is I do like Dr. Rieu in The Plague. He fights the plague. It doesn't have any effect, but he still does it. I'm fighting to elect somebody who I think will try to make things better for American people, and nobody cares.
It's not that nobody cares how, nor that I don't care. Your position is certainly intellectually rigorous. There's little that I could disagree with in Jill Stein's. The only problem, views is expressed there, including the Green New Deal, which I'm an advocate of, as you know, in my writings by title and so forth. However, the difficulty is I have lived more than 70 years, 50 of those deeply immersed in politics, where the dilemmas that she and you present in terms of alternatives to the major parties has come up time and time again. And my stance this year is based on what I've laid out already, that what I think is the greatest existential threat, which is Trump. Nothing, I will say nothing to disparage Jill Stein's view, and in a different context, set of circumstances, she certainly would be the better choice. But I have to add also that, especially with third-party movements, you look at the top of the ticket and what they're saying, what they stand for, and then you ask yourself, have they built, and the Green Party's been around for a long time, have they built the type of infrastructure to achieve as much as the religious right has over the past 30 years? And the answer is no, clearly, unless you believe that the fantastic density of and geographic extent of environmental groups has been able to save the climate and stop all the mal-environmental policies. It hasn't. So there's something missing here. Oh, and by the way, the human rights hero that I cited said the environmental communities was, along with the human rights, the greatest and most widespread democratic force in the world. And I agree with that. So why so little effect on the party system? And I think you know a lot of the answers to that, but it does bear on my my existentialist choice right now.
Bill, I was going to end the program with that because I always give my guests the last word after I talk over them for an hour. But but you said some things that are fascinating to me, and one of them is well, let me agree, right? The Green Party has not gained traction. And there are a lot of problems I have with the Green Party. There are reasons that I haven't supported the Green Party at all aggressively in the past that I don't want to get into right now, but they go much more to policy than popularity. But there's some issues that I think where they do embrace sort of kind of out there stuff that I don't think is either wise or going to increase their popularity. But that said, don't we have a duty in this time, you, me, anybody, everybody, to work together to try to build a true alternative, a true progressive alternative? I know we looked at, and I did for sure, trying to move the Democratic Party from the inside-outside strategy. That's failed. It just hasn't happened. And concurrently, I was also trying to work with the Greens, but again, they're problematic. But don't we have a duty then, if the Green Party isn't the right vehicle, it may be the best we have, it may be a broken down old jalopy that'll barely move us down the road a little bit, but at least it's not going full bore in the opposite direction. Don't we have a duty to find a better vehicle or to build a better vehicle rather than just allow things to keep getting worse?
Yes.
Okay. All right, man. Anything else? Anything I didn't let you say that you wanted to say, or that I didn't give you an opportunity to fully vet that you wanted to?
No, Hal. I think if your listeners here, want to know about the earthly embodiment about what I'm writing about, it's in some of the people: Wendy Brown, Peter Drucker, Herbert Marcuse, The History of Them, Steve Fraser, who's still living, Stuart Jeffries, the journalist historian who wrote about the Frankfurt School, Marshall Berman, All That Is Solid That Melts in the Air, the last positive leftist case to embrace all the troubles that go with modernity, the inventions as well as the destruction. It's a marvelous book. His handling of what happens to the elderly couple in Goethe's Faust has to be read by every environmentalist, and anybody that doesn't like being crushed by Robert Moses types and Larry Summers representing them. But I don't know anybody else that mentions him. It's a great read. I should have put him in there.
All right, Bill, thank you. You sort of froze on me just for a second. I'll let you get your lunch. Do me a favor, stick with me for 1 second after the program ends. I'll be back tomorrow for the free-for-all. I'm going to recap a little bit tomorrow the conversation I had yesterday, which I thought was an excellent one with Nancy Wallace, Green Party candidate, by the way, in the 8th District here in Maryland for Congress. And I'll go over some of the other issues as well. It's probably touch base a little bit on what Bill and I discussed, but we hashed that pretty well. Also, tariffs will be on the in the slide deck. So that'll do it for me today. Bill, thank you again, and I'll be back tomorrow.
All right. Thank you, Hal.